Welcome into episode 191 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Well, that was a doozy last night. The Bruins, they found a way to lose in overtime in Game 5 of their first round series against the Florida Panthers. And, well, there's a lot of places we could start with this one, guys. But the first thing is just a total missed opportunity comes to my mind. We'll break down how the game went, how they played, the good, bad, and the ugly. But for my money, the opportunity to be the first team to advance to the second round of the playoffs, to get that much needed rest. I felt as though going into a second round series against the Leafs or the Lightning, I thought was very imperative for them to get that done last night, considering that Toronto is also up 3-1 in their series. And now they may have just lost that edge of rest. And it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and literally gave the game away and on a couple of those goals. First goal, just horrendous turnover by Tyler Bertuzzi in his own zone. Obviously, some sort of miscommunication with Charlie McAvoy. He, expected McAvoy to stay in the slot clearly, and McAvoy was already moving behind the net. I still think that's on Bertuzzi because, your first option should be the safer play, which is clearly just get it behind the net in that case. And then the game winner, obviously, Linus Ullmark flips it right to Carter Verhaeghe in the corner, gets it out to Matthew Tkachuk in the slot, and he finishes on the backhand. And, again, there's a miscommunication with Grzelcyk where, Grzelcyk's swooping in like he seems to expect to pick up the puck. Ullmark's trying to play it. He doesn't see Verhaeghe kind of drop off and cut off, him sending it up the boards. And again, like it's gotta be on Ullmark because he's the one looking at the play. He's, Grzelcyk has his back turned to the forechecker. Like he can't see exactly where Verhaeghe is. So it's up to Ullmark to put that puck out of danger. And, it's bizarre. Like we've now seen this from them the last two home games. Game 2 is the same thing, just a couple like, oh my God type turnovers where you're like, what the hell was that? And they didn't do that in Florida. Games 3 and 4, they played clean. They took care of business. They were in control. And, I thought Game 5, they, for the most part, were the better team. Like they controlled play, shots, chances, all that were heavily in their favor. But you're gonna have a really hard time surviving in the playoffs when you commit 2 horrendous turnovers like that, and that decides the game. Like they were chasing it in regulation, they kept falling behind by 1, and then they blow it in overtime. So yeah, huge missed opportunity. Still feel like they're gonna win the series. We'll get into that. I'm not super concerned, but yeah, you absolutely would have loved to wrap it up in 5 and be resting right now instead of having to go back to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, for most of that game, it felt like they were in control, and then they're able to score 2 power play goals, but it still feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities on their power play, especially some of those ones that came late after Taylor Hall tied the game, and then they get one. It was just like, okay, well, this could be their chance to take the lead for the first time, and they didn't, and they outshot them a lot, like you mentioned, Scott. It was like 47 to 25, and they outshot them by 10 in both the second and the third periods, and it really did feel like they were winning, but they were not. They never led in that game at all. So they got behind early on that dumb turnover. I'm really sick of him doing that. He just keeps doing these stupid backhand passes to no one. And like, go ahead, try those in the offensive zone if you want. Like, throw a puck out in front of the other net on the backhand without looking if you want, but don't do it in front of your own net. Like, what are you even thinking there? Like, he had 2 seconds to like barely like halfway look over his shoulder. Like he didn't really know what was going on behind him, obviously. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown it there. And even if he did have a longer time to look over his shoulder and see what was going on there, still probably don't do that. Still probably don't put the puck out in front of your own net. And, everybody gets caught off guard. And it just was bad. Like he wasn't one of the guys we got to talk to after the game. I don't really know what he would have said. But it was a really bad way to start the game. And a few of the reporters asked questions to the players about why does it seem like you're having more of these lapses and errors on home ice, and well, like you really can't deny that it has been more at the Garden than in Florida. But Taylor Hall probably gave the best answer. It's a hard question to answer, I guess, when you don't really know why. But he said it's not necessarily. He said basically they're more glaring when they happen at home because the crowd gets taken out of it, and the crowd did get taken out of it after that first goal on the turnover by Bertuzzi. And then at the end of the second period, they go back up by one. Florida goes back up by one, and second intermission was like quiet. Like the whole crowd had been quieted at that point. So I guess in a way he's right that it seems more glaring at home, and maybe that means it's harder to come back from because you can just tell the energy is not the same. Though you should have an advantage at home when you have your home crowd. I mean, they got back into it. And we can get into this too. Some guys that brought the energy back into it, Bergeron being back and getting his goal, and Taylor Hall's goal also. Like there was a real belief in the building that was going to be a win for the Bruins after that Taylor Hall goal.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was a huge boost for the Bruins, theoretically, to get Bergeron back. And, of course, it tangibly had an effect on the score sheet in the third period. The other thing, too, is possibly do guys start to maybe play a little bit looser because in a bad way because they know that their captain's back. And I don't know, it just felt like in games 3 and 4, everybody just had to step up because they knew that they had no choice. And sometimes I feel like maybe you start to get reliant on somebody coming back into the lineup. And I don't think the Bruins played that way in the final 40 minutes of this game. But certainly to start this game 5 back in Boston, the first period was not great. Obviously, Florida is playing for their season, but the Bruins came out and I just didn't love their effort in the first period. I thought that the second period, they were all around the puck. They were territorially controlling the game. But I thought it was a whole lot of nothing. Like, I didn't think that they were very good in their execution around the net. There were a lot of passes that were just off or shots that were whiffed on. They were give Florida credit. They kind of caved in and they made a very good effort in blocking shots. But how many shots are you guys going to get blocked? Like, you're an odd man rusher, shots are getting blocked. Every shot from the point was getting blocked. Like, just you can get a shot blocked every now and then, but it just seems like it was happening too frequent in that second period. But just to bring it back to the first period, and just one of the things I noticed early on in the game, I think on the broadcast they mentioned that the Bruins have had average like 2.7 goals per game at home in the last like dozen or so games of the regular season. And if you take away games 3 and 4 in Florida, the last month of hockey for Boston has been very inconsistent, even throughout their victories. Like everything about it, their play, the roster that's being put on the ice through different reasons, guys on long-term injured reserve, guys getting rest, guys getting like the roster has been so in flux the last month and a half. There's been no consistency in their lineup, in their game, even when they were winning. And outside of games 3 and 4 in Florida, which obviously there wasn't a consistency in the lineup. Well, there was for those two games, but obviously there were some key guys out. Their game was great, those two games. So then you come to game 5, and Jim Montgomery has all these new line combinations. And Scott, you asked about it after the game because I could recognize your voice anywhere. And you asked him about why he changed his lines so quickly in that first period. And I was watching the game, and I understand changing up the lines if things aren't going well. I get that. But it felt to me that he just kept changing all the lines so frequently throughout the course of the game. There was no time for people to even get any runway with each other. It was just too random. Obviously, the Taylor Hall, Coyle, and Hathaway line you mentioned, Bridget, was they played well, But I don't know. I mean, outside, we're going to talk about all the mistakes, like the Bertuzzi mistake, the Ullmark mistake, and there's a couple of players I want to go over in particular. I just look at this team and, like, of course, I have all the confidence in the world that they're gonna win the series and hopefully win it in 6, like I predicted. But I don't know.
Well,
It just
my guess is out and Scott's guess is out, so it's got to be
yeah.
yours, Brian. Otherwise,
I just feel like there's a lot of, like, I just don't know which Bruins team you're gonna see. The last month of hockey, dating back to the regular season, there were a lot of sloppy wins in there, and clearly in Boston in the series it hasn't been great.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to respond to. First, Bridget Taylor Hall's answer about the mistakes. I actually didn't like that answer because I thought it kind of missed the point.
it did definitely. It was. I kind of felt like it was the only way he knew how to answer it, because how do you? I don't think they really know why they made more mistakes on home ice those 2 games.
Yeah, but to me, they're not glaring because it takes the crowd out. They're glaring because they end up in the back of the net, and they didn't make those mistakes in games 3 and 4. Like, it's not the crowd that was different. It's that they didn't do that. So I actually like Hampus Lindholm's answer better, which was, maybe we were keeping things simpler on the road, which could be it. Like, instead of Bertuzzi trying to pass into the slot, he does just chip it behind the net. So I think, like, there might be something to that. So then as far as the line changes, look, Montgomery's had this magic touch all year where it seems like every time he changes the lines, it works out. And that's part of the reason why, down the stretch, guys were able to play with different people. I thought he finally outsmarted himself a little bit with the lines that he started the game with, where, I wrote this up on Tuesday when he broke it out in practice, and I could see the reasoning. I could kind of see what he was going for, especially with Bergeron and Marchand split. It just didn't work. And to his credit, he realized it wasn't working quickly and changed. But it did feel like that sort of set the tone where they got off to a little bit of a slow start. They fell behind. And it took guys a while to kind of get into the game, get going. And I absolutely think, he said, like, I don't really know if the line changes are why we didn't, come out with the right energy or whatever. And it's hard for me to look at and think it's not related, because if you're feeling out new line mates and trying to figure out how to play together, like, that can absolutely contribute to a slow start where, you're not really on your toes. And, no surprise to me, like, you get back to more familiar line combinations and it starts to look better, and they start to have more shifts where they're in control at 5-on-5. So I feel like, for game 6 now, like, go with the line combinations that got you here. And that's, Marchand, Bergeron, DeBrusque, which played well once they finally got together in the second period again. Bertuzzi, Zacha, Pastrnak, which, was good down the stretch when Krejci was out, and I thought was pretty solid last night. Get Trent Frederick back in. I thought that was another place where Montgomery overthought it. Leaves Lauko in, and it's like, again, I understand, you want the speed. You feel like that's something that can hurt the Florida defense. Well, Lauko kind of hurt you more last night, taking two penalties. The only 2 penalties the Bruins took that sent Florida to a power play. So, and yeah, the second one should have been both. That was bad job by the refs. It should have been Lauko and Tkachuk going. So I don't want to be too harsh on Lauko, but I do think you could have used Frederick. Like, he doesn't have a point in this series, but he was getting chances. I didn't think Frederick was playing poorly, and I just think, I think Montgomery fell a little too in love with the idea of, like, Lauko, Nosek, Hathaway, and now you end up you try Foligno on third line. I thought he had a little bit of an off game, then you move Hathaway up, and he played well there, but Hathaway is really the perfect fourth liner. So get Frederick back in his usual spot next to Coyle. Keep Hall there, and then if you want to go Foligno, Nosek, Hathaway, like, I think that makes sense. So, and that's all, David Krejci has not been ruled out for game 6 yet, so that's an option. I guess maybe we'll find something out Thursday. Montgomery's meeting with the media around 12:15 on Thursday. So depending on when people are listening, that might have already happened, but we'll see what Krejci's status is. But otherwise, like, yeah, go with the lines that got you here. You know, just think you got a little too cute trying some different combinations. And that might have, contributed to their slow start.
Yeah, those lines were absurd. Like those lines to start were absurd. And like you said, you can kind of see what he was trying to do. And like that Bertuzzi Bergeron Pasta line, it's like you put Bergeron there as the defensive forward on that line and to try to make up for the fact that sometimes Bertuzzi and Pastrnak aren't responsible defensively. Marchand, Coyle, Foligno, I did not like that from the beginning. And Lauko, though I don't think he's played bad in the series, you can't rely on him for as many minutes as you can rely on Trent Frederic for. You're not just putting him out there for as much time. And yeah, he takes the 2 penalties. The second one, maybe they should have got him, both him and Tkachuk, but like you can't put yourself in that position. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The puck ends up in the back of the net on the power play because you ended up in the box. And so you hurt the team. I know it's hard to not want to get into it with Tkachuk. He's a pain. But he won that time. Should they have called both? Yes, but sometimes they don't see it that way. So you can't really do that. And that was immediately following Bergeron's goal. It was literally on the center ice face-off seconds after he had scored. So it was momentum. Captain scores. Oh my God, he's back. He scores, and power play goal against right after. So I think Frederic in for sure. Lauko or Foligno out. Probably Lauko, but like you mentioned, Foligno. And I don't necessarily fault Foligno for all of this because he was one of the guys that got moved quite a bit. There were chunks of the game. I had pointed this out to Scott in the press box that he just wasn't getting shifts for chunks of the game, and he had been out for a long time. So it's probably hard for him to get into the flow of things as well after being changed around and not playing special teams really. So I say Lauko out. I think they missed Frederic too, not just that he can give them more minutes, but I think that he plays the style you want someone to play against, and like the agitators on Florida, where he can be physical and he can be just as annoying after the whistles, but he hasn't been somebody that's been baited into the penalties. So he's a tough guy. He's still got speed. And he kind of balances out those lines if you put them back the way that they honestly should have been. I know after the end of last podcast, I said, if Bergeron comes back, the pieces start to fall into place. Well, they just blew up and like threw them in the blender. And it was, they absolutely did the opposite of falling into place in game 5. So it was, I leaned over to Scott and I was like, how quickly do you think these lines get changed? And we're both like, it's probably not going to last very long, but sometimes it's too late at that point. I feel like Cassidy was guilty of this last playoffs too. Like sometimes you try something and it's by the time you decide to change it, you're already losing. So I don't know. They got the perfection line back together too, which wasn't something they did most of the season. But obviously pretty much every time you put it together, it functions. So, yeah, Bri, once again, we're like running all the bases here, but what are your thoughts on all that?
It's okay. I'm the third base coach. I'm sending you guys home. Yeah, no, I think look, you guys hit it all on the head. I couldn't agree more. It's very frustrating, and it's you get the sense it's like Montgomery is like tinkering with his toys too much. Like it's you look at the lines and you would think that they were down like 5 regulars up front. It's like they were only missing Krejci. So if you're only missing one guy, who by the way they've missed for pockets of this season, and it's like to both of your points, like you win 65 games, you're missing one guy. Why are you putting out line combinations that haven't played together all year? Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to adjust your lineup when you're up 3-1 to face the Florida Panthers? Like, you're the team that has the best record in the league's history. You're the team that's up 3-1. You're at home. Why do you have 4 brand new combinations? Is what and then even when he changed the lines, he's going to other brand new combinations like we talked about, the Hathaway, Hall, and Coyle combo. Yeah, they played well, but to Scott's point, Hathaway's a third liner. And that just speaks to the fact that you had to put him up there to try to get people going. Why am I seeing a combination of Bertuzzi, DeBrusque, and Zacha when we haven't seen that yet? Now, sure, did they play terribly? No. But it's just like there's a feeling out process when you have new line mates, and in the middle of a playoff series when you're up 3-1 shouldn't be the time to do that. Like, so it's very frustrating to me.
Also,
Now,
with Frederick in, you don't have to put Hathaway on. Like, Hathaway is definitely on your fourth line if Frederick's in. So, like,
yeah.
And also Frederick can play center. Like, don't take that out of it. Like, we've been saying things about him this whole time about how versatile he's been showing himself to be in the playoffs, and you take him out, and I feel like you overdid it there.
Yeah, I mean, he took away his own backup plan, right? Like, it was like that lineup. It was like Foligno had to work next to Coyle because the natural backup plan, if that didn't really work, would be put Frederick there, but he wasn't even in the lineup, so you couldn't even make that simple switch. So it has to be Hathaway, and yeah, just a little odd. But yeah, I fully
Brian,
expect
we cut you off again.
yeah, I fully expect Frederick to be back in unless he's dealing with something. But as far as we know, he's not. But like, I was looking up like numbers for the series, and Frederick is like top 3 among forwards in shots on goal per 60 minutes, scoring chances per 60 minutes. Like, he was getting chances, and they just weren't going in. And I just feel like Montgomery like overreacted a little to maybe some bad puck luck and sort of fell a little too in love with Lauko's speed, and in the process kind of overlooked just a really good consistent season from Frederick, pretty much start to finish. And it's like, to me, I feel like Frederick's gotten to a point where like you got to have some trust in him and give him a little bit of leash to kind of figure out the finishing part of it, like that last step. If he was getting no chances and was like just clearly playing poorly and turning pucks over all over the place, I'd say like, okay, yeah, that's reason to sit a guy. But I didn't feel like that's what he was doing. So that definitely stood out as an odd call.
He's been more of a spark too than Lauko. If you really think about all the games, like, he's provided a spark there.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you'll definitely see Frederick find his way back into the lineup. I just like I was saying, I just don't think I think it's very unnecessary, and he's out coaching himself, and there's no need. And as far as the way that they're playing at home, it's look, the effort. I certainly thought that the effort was there in the final 40 minutes. But to me, when you have a bunch of random line combinations, that explains a lot of the lack of execution, because it's just everybody's just off a little bit. And I do think Florida gets to a more simple game plan when they're on the road. And I think Florida doesn't really change the game that much when they're at home either. But the Bruins, like, they just shoot themselves in the foot. Now, all things considered, line combinations aside, and Bridget, you mentioned the perfection line, which I don't know if I speak for the two of you, but that perfection line is that adjective, that name is so cringy to me at this point. It's like it was cute earlier on when like they first formed, and like people like the rest of the world like didn't really know how good Pastrnak was at the time, and it was like, yeah, no, this kid's filthy, this line's filthy. But 4 years later, it's like they're not necessarily perfect, and it's just overstated.
Yeah, I mean, and we're now going on 2 years where they haven't been a regular line. Like, you don't, like I had a tweet last night because they got off to a good start in the first period. Corsi was 5-0 when they were on the ice. They had 100% of expected goals, and like just kind of tongue in cheek wrote, some people might call that perfection. But like,
did Brian angry tweet you back after that?
He used his burner.
Yeah, it wasn't my account. It was something else.
It was an egghead. Yeah. But like the reality is that you don't really get to keep a line nickname when you haven't been a regular line in 2 years. And they didn't last long in this game either. Not through their fault, 'cause I thought they were playing well. I thought they looked good together, and the few minutes they got. But mostly because that other line Brian mentioned, Bertuzzi, Zaka DeBrusk, like that wasn't really clicking. That was like a totally new foreign thing. So it's like, yeah, okay, you might as well just switch DeBrusk and Pastrnak because then you get two combinations that everyone knows and has been playing together. So yeah, that did give them a little bit of spark for a little while, and then they settled into more natural lines.
This whole conversation reminds me of something, and it's been something that I've heard talked about, and you want to get Pastrnak going, and he just hasn't really been going in this series. And some of it's puck luck, some of it's, I don't know, being on all these different line combinations. But what do you guys think of Pastrnak just in the series? And has he been set up for success, or do you see areas where it's just like, why aren't they utilizing him this way? Or why is it on him? Is it on the lines? Is it on just not getting that bounce sometimes?
I think it's 100% on the player. I think I've been very disappointed in him in this series, and it sucks because the narrative going into the playoffs by a lot of talking heads and a lot of people who just love to hate is bashing him because, can he do it when the playoffs matter? And people falsely say he's not, but he hasn't been a playoff player. That's not true. Going into this year, Pastrnak has very much been a point per game guy, if not better, throughout his career in the playoffs. So he's done it before, but the whole narrative of oh, he's soft and he'll go invisible when teams check him harder and game plan for him. I've never felt that has been accurate, but I did caution the three of us heading into this series, into these playoffs, that life's going to change for him in the postseason. It's not going to be easy for him. He's not going to be getting these highlight reel goals and these breakaway goals, these one-timer goals, because the playoffs amplifies, teams are game planning for you, all these things. So while I never co-signed on him being soft in the postseason, I did I knew it was going to be tougher for him. And that's why I said it's so important for him to find a way to elevate his game and match that intensity so he can carry that game from the playoffs from the regular season to the playoffs. And the fact of the matter is, guys, I don't care what line you're on. I don't care what you're dealing with. Like, when you go out there and score 62 goals, expectations are going to be sky high. And that's because you place them that way. And you cannot just be a guy out there, an ordinary guy with 62 goals, with a 62 goal season. And it's not like he's dominating out there and just is snake bitten. He really is, for the most part. He's just a guy out there. He's invisible. He's not making Florida, like, Florida is very much looking for him every time he's on the ice, and they're covering him like white on rice. I get that. But he's turning the puck over, which is something that he's been doing all year. And on the power play, it's like he's supposed to be one of the biggest threats in the league on the power play to score. And it just seems like the puck dies on a stick. He'll just blindly just turn. Bridget, you talked about Bertuzzi with the blind passes and the turnovers, which is true. Pastrnak does it on the power play constantly, and right into the slot, and they just ice the puck. And it kills the power play. And one of you guys mentioned how, yeah, they scored a couple power play goals, but boy, do they have some really bad power plays outside of those goals that killed momentum for them. And of course, at the end of the game, they had a chance to. And Bergeron got kicked out of a faceoff. Pastrnak goes in there and, barely even attempts to win the draw, gets the puck on a stick, right to the slot, down the ice. Okay, now we're going to overtime. And I know that's a specific example, but Bridget, just to answer your question and to throw it back to Scott, it's been glaring how ineffective he's been. Yes, he has the 2 goals, but he also is like 8th or 9th in the team in scoring right now in the playoffs. And the battle level for my liking just hasn't really been there where it needs to be. And you watch somebody like Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton, and he'll get in there and get nasty and do his thing. I think Pastrnak's too nice out there sometimes. And I know he's a 62 goal scorer, and I'm not going to tell him how to play hockey. But when you've done that, you have to be somewhat that guy in the playoffs.
Yeah. So I dug into some of the numbers this morning and posted them on WEI in my article. By the way, apologize if anyone hears the train horn, Charlie McAvoy's coming through. So, but because my gut on Pastrnak was like, I disagree a little bit with the idea that he's been invisible. I actually think he's been a little. The first 2 games, that line was awful at 5-on-5, and we talked about that. And Krejci was a big part of it. He was really struggling, and now hasn't played since. I think he's been better. I'm not going to say great. I think he's been better at 5-on-5, and some of the numbers back that up. His like when I looked at it, because I wanted to find, all right, what's been different this series versus regular season aside from the goals and points. His 5-on-5 numbers in terms of like shots, scoring chances, expected goals, like the rates of all that, pretty much in line with his regular season. Shooting percentage is down, which that goes into the all right. Part of that is you got to work harder to finish. Part of it's also maybe just some bad luck. And, Jim Montgomery, maybe this is just trying to build a player up, but he kind of chalked up to bad luck after the game. Said, they'll start to go in. He's too good for it not to. He actually, praised his hard work. Thought he won some battles, which last night in particular, I would agree with. I actually thought whatever line he was on tended to be pretty good last night and was getting zone time and creating chances. The 2 goals against that he was out there for, not his fault. One was the Bertuzzi turnover and one was the Ullmark turnover in overtime.
But didn't that start with Pasta accidentally clearing it the length of the ice the wrong way?
Was it Pastrnak or Marchand? I thought it was Marchand that made the pass back.
I have to double check. Yeah.
But where the numbers are way different and where I suspected they would be is the power play, which and by the way, 5-on-5, his turnover rate down from regular season, so that's good. On the power play, way up, turnover rate way up, shots, scoring chances, all that way down. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, the power play is still over 30% for the series, so they've been able to score without Pastrnak getting a ton of shots. So I would say don't start force feeding the puck just to try to get Pastrnak going. Like if other guys are the ones scoring and getting chances, then keep doing that. What I worry about is it feels like Pastrnak is, because he's not getting as many chances, is trying to force more when the puck does get to his stick. And I think that's why you see those turnovers and why you see some of those sloppy passes. And you see him trying to get through multiple defenders on entries instead of making simple plays, just dishing to a teammate or chipping it in and going to get it with speed. And to me, that's the number one thing I want to see change is stop forcing on the power play. If his role in the power play has to be facilitator or even decoy because teams are, shading him or even almost doubling him, then so be it. The other guys are scoring on the power play right now, so he doesn't have to force it. And I kind of feel like he has been. And that would be my biggest concern. That the 5-on-5 stuff, I think something that will come back. Yeah, he can be better there, but he's getting chances. His line's getting chances. They're not going in. I tend to believe that over time that changes. More chances will start to go in. So not as worried about the 5-on-5. I like that he's not turning the puck over as much there. Power play, though, he kind of looks like a mess. And it's almost like he's getting frustrated that he's not scoring, even though the team still is. And that's why I think you see some of these sloppy power plays where, he's kind of at the center of some bad plays. So I think if he can be more selfless in the sense of not trying to get his, eventually he will get his. If the Bruins are moving the puck well and other guys are getting chances, eventually teams are not going to be able to shade him as much. So then he'll open up. That's kind of the natural order of things is, a good power play takes what's being given to them. And I feel like Pastrnak's not really doing that right now.
I just double checked and went back, and it was Marchand that made that pass that didn't connect with anyone, and then that's how come Ullmark was out playing it behind his net. But that play happened so fast in real time, and I thought it was Pasta, so I packed all my stuff up and I ran downstairs because I knew it was going to be like 2 seconds. Like there was no celebrating after that game. Montgomery was going to be at the stand immediately. So anyway, in terms of Pasta, a few more things, because we can transition into something else that I'm thinking of that's related. But I think I'm like in between you guys maybe a little bit. Like he hasn't been nearly as effective as you would expect or need him to be. Like you mentioned, when you see how far down he is on like Bruins scoring, you're probably a little bit surprised. And I think at times he was not nearly the most noticeable player on the ice, and you want him to be one of those guys for you. So he did at times disappear, I think. And at least in a way that wasn't like, okay, he's just kind of out there. And sometimes it's Bertuzzi that's more noticeable on the ice. And just he definitely has another gear. And teams should be afraid when it starts to look like he's hitting that gear, but he's not quite there yet. And that brings me to like the next question, which is if Krejci's back in the lineup, is that something that could kickstart that maybe for him? I mean, he's somebody that has been playing. That's been the natural spot for him all season, right? The check line has been the line he's played on the most. Do you think that factors in if Krejci were to come back and get Zacha, Krejci, and Pastrnak back together, that just gives him a little bit more familiarity or just a nudge in the right direction, because Krejci's a good playmaker.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would do that. I feel like, and just I guess just like one last thing I would just say about that conversation a minute ago. Like Scott, like I hear everything you said, and I get that, but I guess at the end of the day, and I don't mean to make this black and white, but like he has to score for them. Like he has to be a finisher. That's what he's paid to do. That's what he's the best at in the world, second to Connor McDavid apparently. Like it's just a couple like scoring chances going up a little bit at 5-on-5 or being at least what they were in the regular season alone when he's doing what he's been doing on the power play, and like it has to be better. He has to execute. It's just the nature of the business that they're in.
Yeah, and I do think some of that from the finishing perspective too is like his shot has just been a little off. Like he's had some good looks where he's missed the net or put it right in the goalie's gut, and it's like, that's the kind of thing that, maybe that changes with confidence. Maybe you see one and you get going, but he has definitely like missed a couple good chances where you're like you usually expect him to bury that, and it's just been a little off.
Yeah, it's like if this series goes 7, it just seems like, well, what did Pastrnak do through 6 games? And if it stays 2 points, it's like, well, that's probably a big reason why it's going 7. Bridget, great question. I think that personally, I think games 1 and 2, I was honestly surprised to see Krejci. Well, I guess I wasn't because Bergeron was out, so they needed Zacha to step up. But yes, I didn't like Krejci with Pastrnak when they were with Bertuzzi. But to your point, the check line was great all year that they were together. And I think that if Krejci comes back, I think you should do Krejci, Zacha, and Pastrnak. I think that they've been really good all year. Oddly enough, I feel like Pastrnak needs Zacha in a way. Like I feel like Zacha and Pastrnak have great chemistry, and he plays at the speed at which Pastrnak can play with. And Krejci does fit well on that line. So if Krejci's back for game 6, I would absolutely go back to really, aside from that third line, which will have to be tinkered with, but I would say if Krejci's back in the lineup, just go back to everything that kind of got you to where you were before all those injuries started to pile up in February, I would say. So I would do Bergeron, Marchand, and Nebraska. I would do the check line. You'd have to get creative with that third line. I would imagine the combo we've never seen that we always talk about with Hall, Coyle, and Bertuzzi, and then maybe Fred. I don't know. It's tough. That bottom 6, we've never seen it fully healthy with their whole arsenal of players. But I definitely, that top 6, I would definitely go back to that top 6.
Isn't it crazy that there hasn't yet been a game in this series where the Bruins have had all their centers? like all of their centers healthy. So then you can't put those pieces into place.
Yeah, and on Krejci, like, I guess if he comes back, I want to make sure he is as close to fully healthy as possible, because he can't come back and look the way that he did in games 1 and 2. Like that Krejci doesn't help you. Honestly, he was probably hurting them more than helping in those games. So, hopefully you take the same approach as you did with Bergeron, which is they didn't rush it. Like whatever it was he was dealing with, they let it heal, and he looked pretty good in his first game back. And presumably, if as long as he doesn't re-injure or re-aggravate or whatever, will continue to look even better. I want them to make sure that they do the same thing with Krejci, where hey, we just lost. Like, don't panic and get him back in if he's going to be 65%, because the lineup they had last night is good enough to win. Like, you should be able to beat the Panthers with that lineup. So I don't want to force Krejci back in until he's really ready and healthy enough to be effective, because he was not effective in games 1 and 2. So I don't want him to just get back to that point where, okay, he can play, he can go out there, but is he actually doing anything? So I kind of have my doubts as to whether he's going to play in game 6, but he has been skating on his own the last couple of days. So he's been on the ice. Tuesday, he really wasn't doing a whole lot of shooting, which, maybe that suggests it's something. We know it's upper body, but maybe it's something arm related or shoulder, hand, could be something that would affect his shooting, or handwork in general. Wednesday, he was doing a little bit more of that. So I guess that's, a step in the right direction. So we'll see. But if he's going to be way less than, even 90%, then I'm not forcing it.
No, because he's already, we've not to be mean, but he's one of the older players on the team. So he's already a little bit behind some of the, say, Kachucks of the world and that are out there playing at just such a crazy pace, and also playing very physical. So they're able to throw you off your game a little bit easier if you're only at 90% or so, or less. And it's been cryptic with Krejci once again. This is going to be something that's going to be a game time decision once again. And not sure we'll really know until puck drop, because that last game, or the first game that he was taken, that he didn't play, he actually took warm-ups, and then all of a sudden it was like he's not in, which they knew he wasn't going to be in, but to us, we're seeing him out there and we're not thinking anything of it. But now we'll probably wait until actual puck drop to be sure, I guess you could say. Bergeron, they said the same thing about him, though. I had the suspicion that if he took warm-ups for game 5, he was going to play. And he had also practiced in those lines, the horrible lines that can we just forget about those and throw those out?
Yeah, we can if Montgomery does. If he puts them on again next game, we gotta keep looking at them.
I'm talking to you, Jim. Can we just forget that those existed?
Jim didn't seem so jolly after last night's game, huh? Even in the past, he's always been a little bit optimistic after losses. You could kind of tell in his voice and his demeanor. He was pretty pissed off about that one.
Well, just think about how you lost. I still am stunned what I saw in the last 20 seconds of that game. It is so it was just devastating. You've kept yourself in it. You've chipped back every time you go down. You have one of the best goalies in the league who stops stuff that he has no business stopping. He's making saves with his face. He's kicking out the pads. He's having the best season. He's so good. And then all of a sudden, this uncharacteristic thing happens. And I feel like this happens more in the playoffs somehow, that a goalie goes behind the net and accidentally plays it to someone that just wraps it in and scores or whatever.
Craig Smith against the Capitals a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's that's such a bad way to lose. You beat yourself at the end of it all. it's hard to walk right from seeing that to the press conference. And like, I feel like everybody in the building was shell-shocked in a way, players, fans, coach, because it's not like, oh, we could have done this better, blah, 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 like to stop that last play from happening. Like, it was something fundamental like that. It was like this weird fluky thing that Ullmark is usually pretty good at coming out and playing pucks. He wasn't in game 5. He made another mistake earlier in the game, and then he shot the puck into the Florida bench at one point and had to apologize. He like shot it clear into their bench, point blank. But it was just one of those ways of losing that it's you don't see it coming.
It happens to other teams. It doesn't happen to the Bruins. Like to your point, Bridget, you see that happen all the time in playoffs or regular season. Like you'll see it on Twitter or you'll see it on, and you're like, and your reaction's like, oh my God, what an idiot. That sucks for that fan base. It's like that never happens to the Bruins. The Bruins lose. Hey, outside of 2011, the Bruins have found a way to lose every single year, just like most teams, but they never oftentimes beat themselves like that. That was like when you hear people say like over 20 years, like how Patriots fans would always watch other teams just play such pedestrian football, but the Patriots would never make those fundamental mistakes. Like that was just a fundamental mistake where it's like, dude, you're the goalie. Yes, you've been handling the puck well this year. Yes, you're allowed to play the puck. That's part of the position. But buddy, it's overtime of a playoff game. Like, can you have a little bit more conviction and decisiveness when you go behind the net to play the puck and not just do it? Like, you literally just gave the game away. Now you can cast some blame to Grizzlick, I guess, if you want a little bit, but like to me, that's Ullmark. And
he had a weird handoff to Lindholm earlier in the game too.
You just can't do it. You just can't do that.
I doubt he does it again.
Well,
I think we won't see him probably go too far outside the net. I mean, that being said, in his post game comments, he kind of was like,
of course, he's gonna play it that way.
Shrug, like,
yeah, he was Ted Lasso. You know, you gotta have brain of a goldfish. Just forget about it.
He was like just as calm as I've ever seen him, truthfully.
And which, by the way, because like I already see, like I've seen people like freak or not really freaking out, but like kind of upset with Ullmark's comments. Like he didn't seem mad enough, and like we used to hear this with Tuca too, and it's like, guys, like this is how goalies are. Like it's honestly part of like being a successful goalie. It's just like if you let every little mistake drive you crazy and you start throwing shit around, you know, you pull Chris Sale and you're banging stuff around, like that doesn't work for a goalie. Like you're gonna be out of the league in 2 years because you're gonna be a head case. Like part of the reason goalies get to this level and are successful is because they legitimately do just forget about stuff 2 minutes later. And
Scott, remember, we have to remember to bring this up to Razor this weekend.
Yeah, and like they don't dwell on it. They move on. They have to turn the page, not just after a game, but in game. Like you give up, you get beat glove side on, you know, a long wrist or a soft goal. You can't sit there the rest of the game hating yourself, kicking yourself. Like you got to regroup and make the next save, which could be 12 seconds later. So, you know, I just think like people want athletes to sound like fans and be like all worked up about stuff. And it's like them not doing that is part of the reason that they are professional athletes and not fans. So like, don't worry about Linus Ullmark not sounding mad enough at himself. Like he hates that he did that. It's not, no matter how he sounds, it's not like he's sitting there like, oh, well, whatever. No big deal. Like, who cares? Like, no, he does care. He knows he made a mistake, but he's not going to sit there and be like, I suck and start throwing his equipment all over the locker room in front of the media. Like it's just not going to happen.
No, also, that doesn't help anything at all for him.
Yeah.
His personality is very consistent though. Like that is how he's been after games the entire year. This time, maybe you think he might be a little different because doesn't usually end like that, like we said. But there's only one other game this year that had like a weird last second ending like that, which wasn't even completely the Bruins' fault, was that Arizona game where they should have called icing and the puck came back out in front with like 7 seconds left or whatever it was, and they scored. I don't even know if it was Ullmark in net for that, actually.
I think it was Swayman.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, so that's another thing.
Well, and there was the game. There's the game in Florida, the late time goal too, where Pastrnak gave them the lead in the final minute, and then they blew it in the last second and lost.
Yeah,
was that an overtime or a shootout? But yeah, like those are the other ones that kind of stuck out in terms of just, we've just become so accustomed to this team closing games out or finishing them off or not making those mistakes that beat themselves. But yeah, it does happen sometimes.
And like Scott, I don't know if you have any additional opinions on that final play. It's one of those plays like we've mentioned it. There's really nothing else we can really dissect. It was a massive mistake. It was a costly, game-costing mistake, of course. So, like, we can sit here and analyze every step of that play, but it's they screwed up. Ullmark
hopefully
screwed
it's
up.
a one-off.
Well, and I guess the only question that would be spawned from this would be, and this is not necessarily what I believe, but the question that I think people would ask would be, is that blunder that cost the team a game, is that enough to maybe finally get a goalie rotation going here? Just because he's played a lot of hockey. Like, does that mistake happen? I mean, look, I also didn't love. I don't know. I mean, whatever. I'm not going to analyze the Bennett goal, but Scott, is there a reason for people to actually question if Swayman should play in Game 6?
I would say not because of that mistake, because I chalk that up as just a really fluke play and an error that you just don't see that much. I would say if there's any concern about wear and tear, or if Montgomery and goalie Bob look at the tape and think Ullmark, maybe look a little slow on some plays or whatever, and think he's potentially slowing down now, having started 5 straight, potentially going on 6 straight with a travel day in between today. If that's the case, then I would absolutely be open to Swayman. But I wouldn't do it because of that mistake, and I wouldn't even do it because of play, because I didn't think Ullmark had a bad game. Like, all the goals were, I guess you could say like he could have stopped a couple of them, but they would have required really good saves. Like, they were mostly kind of point blank chances. So I'm not. Yeah, like he got a little scrambly on the Duclair one where it's sort of bouncing around, but that was such, it was first such a bad play by Bertuzzi, and then it's kind of it turns into a scramble because of what Bertuzzi does, and everyone's just trying to cover their ass, and like they actually do take away the first shot from Verhaeghe, and he has to hold it, and then it's kind of when he flips it back out front. So I don't think Ullmark played poorly other than the final turnover. So I wouldn't be making any change because of that. But if, and like we just don't know this, but if they look at it and think they see signs of wear and tear, or Ullmark's hurting a little bit, then I've said all along, I'm totally fine with switching to Swayman at any point, because I think Jeremy Swayman's really good, and he was really good in the second half of the season. And, if anything, at this point, I'd be a little bit worried about Russ, because it's now been, several weeks since he's played a game. But I wouldn't have too much hesitation going to him.
I think Ullmark goes right back in and plays angrier than he's ever played. And I think I once again think you open yourself up for the opportunity for fans and media and sports talk radio or whoever to criticize Jim Montgomery if he makes this move too and it doesn't work out. Now you're going to Game 7 because you're playing a Swayman that's not been in action and maybe doesn't look great. You never know. Like, I feel like Ullmark hasn't played himself out of the job despite that horrendous play at the end of the game. And I feel like he is going to want an opportunity to redeem himself immediately. And that could actually do a lot for his confidence. And I don't know, I keep him in there because like I said, he hasn't played bad. He's still in the swing of things. And oftentimes you see when someone does that at the end of a game or has such a horrible mistake, they come back and they play differently the next game. And they sometimes reach, a higher level. And it could be what they need to close out the series. So I think he plays again, honestly. I doubt it. Swayman, not that, but there always is going to be the conversation, right? Because Swayman's good enough to put him in at any time. So just based off of what I've seen in the psyche of it, I think that goes in. I feel like it's going to be Ullmark again in game 6. I think you have to keep going with them. And otherwise, once again, you're taking your number one out of the lineup. And then if you're having all these other changes on your offense, you're not seeing the picture that we all saw during the regular season, which was, all of these lines that were the best combinations and working the whole season. I just want to see it all together. I just want to see all of it in one game put together. Even if they don't have Krejci, can we just not F around with the lines so much and put Bergeron and Marchand and DeBrus together and can we just use what works all at once for game 6?
Well, if health permits it, I guess that's the biggest reason we haven't seen it.
But even if Krejci's out, theoretically, the rest of everyone is healthy enough, and that Bertuzzi, Zacha, Pastrnak line will suffice as that second line, and I will count as a line that works and we know works because we've seen it. So that is a credible line because it's been together since Krejci was dealing with soreness or maybe an injury at the end of the regular season and was missing time too. So to me, that's fine. If Krejci's out, you can still see if you put together the pieces that way, just have it all together for one freaking game.
Yeah, and that would entail Frederick coming back, drawing back in, because that's what would allow that too, because you've seen it all year. I think there's one play I wanted to mention quickly too, but I know we're getting up against it, but we haven't even talked about the defense yet, and I just want to say real quick. A lot of this conversation today would be moot, and we wouldn't be talking about a game 6.
No.
If Brad Marchand scored on that last second breakaway, which would have ended the series right then and there. So that was a backbreaker. I mean, I'm not faulting March. It was a hard shot. He shot to score. I think he was rushing a little bit because he wanted to get the shot off. And I think
if he didn't, it would have been, the time would have expired. It was last second.
I do think he had time for a head.
Well, he didn't know that.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. He didn't realize
he probably didn't have time for what Taylor Hall did last game, right? They kind of come in and then almost stop in the crease, tuck it back. He didn't have time for that.
So devastating if he scored like that, but it was half a second late.
Oh, yeah, well, God. It sucks because you kind of, when that happened, you kind of were like, all right, they're gonna find a way to probably maybe lose this game in overtime, just because that's just how hockey works. I had a sick feeling, not just because the goal didn't go in, because I was like, that could have ended the series, and if Florida wins this game, which they did, I mean, they're going back to Florida now, with all the momentum. And look, am I confident that if the Bruins lose game 6, they're gonna win game 7? Despite how they've played at home in the series so far, yeah, I'm still confident. Have they lost 3 games in a row all year? I don't know. But I just don't want the headlines. I don't want the prospect of Florida coming back to Boston for a game 7 with the momentum of let's pull off the biggest upset in league history after being down 3-1 nonetheless. So, and this is and it's to go and beat a team 3 times in a row on their home ice, which is what the Bruins are tasked with right now. What are the odds of that happening? So this series very well may go 7 games, and I don't like that at all. And I certainly want you guys to respond to that idea of a potential game 7, I guess. But on the back end, can we all agree? Can we get Clifton back in there? Can we get him in there for a little spark plug? Can we take out Forbert, or can he come out? Clifton go back in?
Yeah, I think I probably would, put Clifton in for Forbort. Like, Forbort's played every game, and I get that the penalty kill for the most part has been pretty good, and he's a big part of that. I thought they showed down the stretch that they can kill penalties without him. And like, yeah, you're maybe asking a little more from, your McAvoy, Lindholm, Orlovs, and they get more shorthanded time than you might like, but they can do it. And I just think 5-on-5, like they're struggling to find. They haven't really had like a third pairing that worked. Like Forbort Clifton wasn't playing very well early in the series. Clifton comes out, Grizzly goes in. That Forbort Orlov looked good for a game, and then looked a little off at times. Like it's not. Orlov was making great plays to set up goals. It's a few stretch passes, but that's not really an ideal pairing to me. And then last night they moved Orlov up at one point. They went with Forbort Grizzly for a little while, and I don't really like that pairing either. I don't love Grizzly on his offside, so nothing really feels natural when it's Forbort in and you're putting either Orlov or Grizzly on their offside with him, or even at times like Carlo dropped down for a couple shifts. I worry about the mobility of a Forbort Carlo pairing, so yeah, it does. There's a little bit of like trying to, square peg in a round hole there. And that gets solved if you bring Clifton back in, because I've said for a while, I think their best 5-on-5 D pairs are Grizzly McAvoy, Lindholm Carlo, Orlov Clifton. Like we saw that quite a bit down the stretch when Forbort was out injured, and I thought it worked really well. And for whatever reason, Montgomery seems like very hesitant to roll with that now. And even down the stretch, like he would try going Orlov with McAvoy more, and like he went Grizzly Clifton for a while, which I also don't love. And it's like at some point I'm like, I don't like. Am I seeing that wrong? Like, am I off base, or why does that lineup not make all the sense in the world? Grizzly McAvoy, Lindholm Carlo, Orlov Clifton. You have puck movers on every pairing. You have guys who are defensively sound. Like you have balance. You have your top 3 defensemen are going to be one of them is going to be on the ice at all times. Like, I don't know. It seems like a really good thing. It worked well when they did use it. And I would like to see it in the playoffs. Like it's a little odd to me that they've been so resistant to going to that.
There's a lot of stuff I'd like to see in the playoffs in terms of this lineup. To talk about the defense quickly, Carlo has had a really good series. I think Carlo has been one of their most solid players. He has just been clearing out in front of the net, clearing out pucks, clearing out players, making the right plays, just like fundamentally good hockey from him and what you want him to be. Especially he's a great penalty killer as well. Grizzly, once you brought him in, has done nothing to be taken out of the lineup. I think he's played well since he was put back in. So it's not like you're just switching him back out for Clifton. I wouldn't do that. And I agree. I actually was someone at the beginning of the series that thought maybe they didn't put Forbort back in because they liked what that Orlov Clifton pair looked like, and like maybe waited a little bit deeper in the series to put Forbort in. But that's not what's happened. So I'm cool with putting Clifton back in. I saw him yesterday down after the game. But yeah, I don't know if the defense is really like the biggest issue though. Like I feel like all of the defensemen have played pretty solidly. Like no one has played themselves out of the lineup. It's more just that trying to find the right matchups, and Clifton's faster than Forbort, better puck mover, not as big, not clearing bodies as easily as Forbort, not blocking
Hits
shots
more.
the same way.
He hits more than him. He hits better than him. He's more
hits
physical.
better. He is feistier in a way. Like he's like more after the whistle stuff. And I would like to see him back in there. Yeah, I would. Not that anybody, like I said, has played themselves out of the lineup, but matchup wise, if you're trying to make a change and add some of those things like we just mentioned Clifton can add, just throw him back in there. In Florida, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would love to see Clifton back in there. I think that hand up earlier in the series or before the series started, I didn't mind Grizzly being the odd man out and giving Forbert at least reps to get his feet under him. And I liked the idea of his size and box out ability against a Matthew Tkachuk, against a Barkov or a Bennett or whomever. I just like that a little bit better than Grizzly's ability to do that earlier on in the series. And I definitely said that, acknowledging that it would be sacrificing some transition game and mobility in the meantime. But I've wanted Grizzly in the lineup ever since post game 2 for sure. And yes, they played well in games 3 and 4, but I still think even when they were winning in Florida and certainly in game 5, I think they've missed like Clifton's ability to just be a spark plug back there and to step up with a big hit. I don't feel like outside of Charlie McAvoy and Carlo here and there, I just don't feel like the Panthers forwards have been challenged physically enough by Boston's defense. Orlov gets his nose in there too, but I don't know. It's just I don't think it's a bad idea to have a forward have to think when they're coming across the blue line, oh, this kid might step up when I'm not looking and put me on my ass. And Clifton does that as well as anybody in the team, probably behind McAvoy. So I think, and he can move the puck. He can break the puck out on his own with his feet if he needs to. And I think that sometimes when you're in a tough game that's heavily forechecked and it's tight checking, sometimes you need that so you don't get hemmed in your zone. And he has that ability. And despite that one half ice rush by Forbert last night, he doesn't really bring that to the table very often. So I wouldn't mind Clifton in there. One note I wanted to mention to you guys too, worth mentioning, 4-game goal streak for Taylor Hall in the postseason. They had a stat on the TV last night about the last Bruin to do that, but I think it's been a while. So I mean, clearly he's been really good, especially the fact that he didn't play a lot in the last couple months of the season or at all really. We haven't noticed. We talked about Pastrnak having a non-productive series for the most part. Well, if Taylor Hall isn't doing what he's doing, I think it's an even bigger storyline. But Taylor Hall has kind of stepped up in that role.
If Taylor Hall isn't doing what he's doing, this is a different series. Like, I know some of the goals happened, like the one in game 2 didn't end up meaning anything, and then the one in game 5, even though you lose, like, that was a very impactful goal. That's a game tying 3-on-3 goal in the third period. And he has just been like, I felt like every time he's got the puck on his stick, it's like, is it going to go in? Because it just kind of feels like he's got that touch right now. And I don't know if maybe Jim Montgomery is a psychic in terms of Taylor Hall, because he said that if he was to guess who was going to have a huge series, it was going to be Taylor Hall. And he would be right about that. Not sure he foresaw, these lines in a dream or something, and those need to go away. But Taylor Hall has been playing so well that he is tied with Connor McDavid, I believe, in goals this playoffs, and 1 goal behind Draisaitl for the best goal scorer in the playoffs. And he stepped up where some of the other guys haven't, and produced where one Pastrnak hasn't. And he's been able to stick to what he's good at, his skating, his, puck possession, his like being able to burn you with speed, and he's just been outworking people. So simple as that. He's had a great series. I'm glad you mentioned him, because don't want to gloss over him, because he's been so big. And hopefully, I mean, he's on your third line. Like, you need that kind of production from your bottom 6, and he's giving it to you. You just would like to see the top 6 fill in the rest of the scoring there.
Yeah, Taylor Hall talked earlier in the series about how, he recognized that, like, this is probably the best chance, certainly the best chance to this point in his career to win the Stanley Cup, and possibly the best chance he'll ever have. And he's playing like someone who fully understands that. And really wants to make the most of it, and wants to make sure he's not having any regrets, or, because he talked about that too. He said, like, especially goals against. He said he's been on the ice for goals against in recent postseasons that he regretted, that, he thought like should have been a little better, like lost his focus maybe for a split second, and that proved costly. So yeah, I think you see someone who understands that and has rose to the occasion. I still think, like I said, I think they're going to win this series. In my opinion, it's probably going to be in Game 6, because I thought they were the better team for most of Game 5. And if they don't make two, unbelievably stupid mistakes that have been uncharacteristic for them, they probably win that game. So I think those are fixable. I think they'll clean it up, and I think they probably finish this in 6. But could always use more guys who have the mindset that Taylor Hall has right now, which is someone who's locked in and bringing it on every single shift.
And Brian, to go back to something you said a second ago, just because you asked the question, they did lose three games in a row, one time during the regular season, which was Tampa, Florida, Carolina, which is obviously a really tough stretch of games. Those are the other.
Was that back in like November or something? Or?
That was in January.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was right around the All-Star break.
The funny thing is, the loss to Florida was a 4-3 overtime loss. Same as
that was the one where they scored in like the final seconds after Pastrnak had put them in the lead.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was the only time they've lost 3 in a row, which obviously the Panthers have to win the last 3 games here in the series in order to move on. The Bruins had 3 whacks at a win. Now they only have 2, but they did coming into Game 5. And the other stat is, and obviously things are different in the playoffs, Bruins have only lost 4 home games in the entirety of the regular season, and they've lost 2 in the playoffs.
They lost 4 home games all year, or 4 home games in regulation?
4 home games in 4 actual losses, regulation losses.
Okay. I was going to say that's a lot less than I thought it may have been.
It's only 4 regulation losses at home all season, and they have two losses in the playoffs. Obviously this one's overtime, but you don't get points for going to overtime in the playoffs. So it'd be hard. It'd be hard to see them losing a Game 7, losing 3 of their 4 home games.
But it happens.
It happens. Yeah, but
that's why you can't put too much weight on regular season.
That's why you can't predict a sweep, Scott.
Hey, real quick.
They would have swept if Bergeron played every game.
Yeah, of course they would have. 60 seconds or less. I had one more question and comment for you guys. A big talking point we had on this podcast for about, I'd say at least a month or so heading into the postseason was the slump, the lack of looking like himself. And of course, I'm talking about Brad Marchand at the time. And the question was, is this going to translate to the playoff? Is this going to carry over to the playoffs, or can he just flip the switch? And fortunately for everybody that's cheering for the Bruins, he's flipped the switch. He has 4 goals in the series, and he, outside of the goals, skating wise, confidence wise, playmaking wise, has seemed a hell of a lot more closer to the Marchand that we've gotten to know here in Boston. And maybe just a quick comment on that from you guys.
Yeah, he's been awesome, and now keep him with Bergeron. Don't try to change the lines again. He obviously stepped up with Bergeron out, both on and off the ice. Now let those two get clicking again. Don't get cute, Jim.
He is somehow drawn the narrative of him to being this mature, level-headed player this series. So, I mean, at the very least, he's shown a side of him that was different than what we've seen in the past. He's an emotional guy, but he's been able to hold it, to just keep it under wraps, keep it clean, and he's looked better for sure in the playoffs than at the end of the regular season, the last 20 games of the regular season. So yeah, he's looked good. This podcast could go on forever. I feel like there's so many things that were at play in Game 5.
Of course, yeah. But fortunately for our listeners, We will not be going on forever.
We'll shut up now.
I want to go on forever because I finally have a computer that actually works.
Oh yeah, that's right. Look at you. You didn't lag once.
Yeah, I thought you looked a lot clearer, Scott. This is crazy. Wow, it's like
know.
HD McLaughlin.
Got a new computer earlier this week, and knock on wood, held up through the first podcast. So hopefully that'll be a better experience for everyone listening or watching.
He told me if it worked, he was going to throw his other laptop off of his porch. So
No. I said
balcony.
if this one didn't work, I was going to throw this one off too.
Oh, he was okay. He was going to throw it. I know he was throwing something off the balcony.
The other one's already in the trash. I was done with that one. That's
you should. I mean,
that's in the Merrimack River.
Well,
just kidding. Don't pollute, kids.
All right, guys. Any closing thoughts?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Bridget?
No.
All right. So the Bruins are going to try to close the series out Friday night. I believe it's Friday night, right? 7:30?
7:30. Yes. Unfortunately, I like the 7 starts better.
Yep. So, you'll be hearing from us, win or lose. So thank you all for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.